from 46 countries. And I'm glad to welcome you on our Zoom, Slack, or YouTube channels. And I want to ask a few questions before we start. And my first question is, what are we doing? Recently, my little grandson asked this question to me. And my brief answer was, I'm a problem solver. And I gave him a few examples of my work. But what we as a decision management community are really doing? And 25 years ago, Professor Jean Froder, in his famous paper, In Pursuit of the Holy Grail, gave the best definition you can find. We are in business of helping computers to help people make better decisions. This is very precise definition, and I believe today we continue our pursuit of this Holy Grail. We're trying to find the best way to represent decisioning logic that is naturally expressed by human expert and that can be executable by machines. By the way, I want to share with you good news. Jean Froder, who was our presenter in DecisionCAMP in London, this year received the most prestigious artificial intelligence award in research area. And I expect that Jean is listening to us right now, and I want to ask you to give him a round of applause, practicing our Zoom reacting buttons. Okay, congratulations, Jean. Okay, let's continue. And my second question is, how do we do it? In most cases, our customers have pretty sophisticated software landscape. And in different places inside this landscape, you can find something what I like to call golden nuts of business logic, or golden grains. But these nuts of business logic could be everywhere. They could be in stored procedures, in triggers, or in Java, or C++, or C# code. And recently, people put them in Python, or even in R languages. But what our customers recognize that it's much better to externalize this logic and give control over this logic to business people. So that's the picture what they're looking at. So the same customer's software should be able to communicate with the externalized business logic. And usually we call this we put this logic or golden nuts in rules or knowledge repository. And then we create decision models. And then we deploy these decision models on premise or on cloud. And finally, they could be presented as operational decision services, or these days we prefer the word microservices. And independently, what tools our customers using, they always have to address two major questions. How to manage externalized logic? What is the role of business people? What is the role of software developers? How they work together? And the second question, how to execute this logic? And these days we have extremely serious requirements to performance. And if you look on the final picture, I try to put together this top-level diagram. So this is our customer software on the left, and it should talk to various decision services. And there are, if you look on all services, we can classify them in three types of services. Operational decision services that are based on business rules, using traditional rule engines and any rules-based technology. Then we can consider recently became very popular machine learning services, when we can, analyzing historical data, can come up with new rules and completely support them while our system in operational mode. And finally, we can apply different optimization technology to create optimization decision services using constraint or linear solvers. And all these services should somehow be connected. And this orchestration of these services becomes more and more important. And I would even say I expect this to become a focal point in the next few years. And that's why so many service orchestrations platforms available on cloud or on premises become more and more popular, and major cloud providers do very good job in this area. So this is my high-level picture, and the good news is that when I analyzed all our 18 presentations, they cover a lot of issues on these pictures, including all types of services and orchestration, and I hope you will enjoy these 3 days. And that's probably enough for introduction, and I want to give control to Sandy Kemsley, who is kindly agreed to be in charge of all logistical questions. Sandy?
Thanks, Jacob. Okay, let me unshare your screen, and going to share mine. Okay, I'm just going to go through the logistics. As Jacob pointed out, and as some of you know, I'm not really part of the decision management community. I'm more of a process person, if you will. But I was at DecisionCAMP last year and really enjoyed it. And then when I've been watching some of the online conferences that have happened so far, I was writing about it, and Jacob asked me to come and help with the logistics here. So I've been doing that. I want to go quickly through the logistics, just how it's going to work for the next 3 days, and then we can get started. So to begin with, Zoom is our broadcast platform, as we are here today, and then Slack is our discussion platform. If you go to the DecisionCAMP website, you will see the links to the Slack workspace. If you are not yet on Slack, please head over there, because that's where we're going to be taking the Q&A, and also where presenters can answer questions and we can have discussions afterwards. We're also planning an after-conference Zoom chat, where we'll have like a separate Zoom session where people can just come in, open mic, chat, the same way as you would stand around and chat. Drinks optional, but you know, whatever you like. So go over to the Slack general channel and show your interest in that for which night that you would like to have that happen. You can see the schedule and all the other information over here at the DecisionCAMP website. And as I said, the presentations are going to be on Zoom. Unfortunately, we had been planning to live stream on YouTube, but we took this Zoom meeting over directly from the declarative AI sessions, and they had not set up to allow me to start the YouTube streaming. Hopefully we'll have that sorted out by tomorrow, and we'll be able to stream live on YouTube as well. However, the presentations are going to be made available, recorded and made available on YouTube afterwards, except for those where the presenter has asked that we don't record the sessions. If you want to ask a question about a presentation, you can raise your hand in Zoom, use the participants panel, and wait to be called on. I'll call on you during the Q&A, or type your questions in the Slack channel. And today we're using the 2020-6-29 sessions channel. So just go in there and type in your questions. I see Alan Fish, who's our first presenter, is in there already. And then the presenters will be able to respond to any unanswered questions on Slack afterwards if we aren't able to get to your question during the presentation. As I said, recordings will be on the DecisionCAMP YouTube channel, and that's about it for the logistics. If you have any problems with Zoom, you can use the Zoom chat, but please, if you have any questions, either use the raise hand or go over and put them on the Slack channel. All right, I am going to ask Alan Fish to share his screen. I have him as a co-host, so he should be able to do that. Oh, we see a video, Alan.
Hi, Sandy. Thank you.
Alan, let me introduce you first, and I see some people have troubles with accessing our Zoom meeting. So password is 319851. 319851. Sandy will put it on the website now.
The link that's in the session, today's sessions, it has the password embedded in it. So if you use that link that's in the 2020-06-29-sessions channel, that's pinned on there, and you should be able to link directly to there.
Okay, very good. Okay, so our first presenter is Dr. Alan Fish. And Alan is the author of one of the first books on decision management. He is also inventor of DRDs, decision requirements diagrams, and he is co-chair of DMN task force. I know Alan for many years, and I can tell you every time when he does presentation, I'm listening very attentively, and then I go back and read his presentation slides again. And this year, he has a very interesting presentation, what he called the incomplete decision models. I hope you will enjoy it as I will. Alan?
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, so just to add to Jacob's introduction, which is very generous, thank you, Jacob. Just to explain what I do within my company, FICO. I'm a principal consultant there, and I work as a business analyst doing requirements definition on projects involving decision automation or decision support. In particular, complex projects which involve both human and automated decision making. And as Jacob says, today I'm going to talk about incomplete decision models. DMN, the decision model and notation, which is a common theme running through a lot of the papers in this conference, is being adopted with enthusiasm around the world, partly because it is complete. It has three levels. It has a top diagrammatic notation, which shows you the structure of decision making to be carried out. It has a level of box expressions and decision tables, which effectively provide containers for decision logic and are mapped to the elements in the top level. And finally, it has an expression language called FEEL, which provides the detailed decision logic, which has a defined execution semantics. And indeed, you can plug other languages into it as well. So what DMN provides is a complete and executable decision model. And this completeness is a hugely powerful feature of the standard. But the DMN spec explicitly says that it must be possible to interchange incomplete models. So why? Why does it specify that, and how is it useful? So today, I thought just for a change, I would talk about the benefits of models which have bits missing. So we'll start by looking at the use of incomplete models in methodologies. And this is the use case which is addressed in the DMN spec. There's a paragraph there that says, it is common for DMN models to be interchanged before they are complete. This occurs frequently when doing iterative modeling, where one user, such as a knowledge source expert or a business user, first defines a high-level model and then passes it on to another person to complete or refine the model. Now, this paragraph describes the sequential aspect of creating decision models, but studiously avoids any mention of a specific methodology. There are a number of methodologies available to you. I've got three shown here. There's TDM STEP, which is described in Barb and Larry's book on the decision model, very influential tome. There's DRAW, which is my methodology, which I described in Knowledge Automation. This was written pre-DMN, but as Jacob said, it was based on DRDs, which were then adopted by DMN. And then there's Bruce Silver's DMN method and style, which is indeed based directly on DMN. There are differences in detail, I would say, rather than overall approach. All of these prescribe some sort of top-down decomposition based on analyzing out the requirements for decision-making. So I'll just pick one of these entirely at random and take you into a bit more detail. So DRAW stands for Decision Requirements Analysis Workshop. So it focuses on how to carry out this decomposition in collaborative workshops, usually between business analysts and business subject matter experts. It's a top-down approach, and it starts with the top-level decisions. That is, the decisions which the business actually needs to make. In analyzing the requirements for these top-level decisions, you very often identify other sub-decisions which need to be made. So these are decisions whose results are not needed directly by the business, but they're necessary in making the top-level decisions. And then for each of the decisions in this network, we determine the input data required and the areas of business knowledge which will be used to make the decision. And the result is a complete decision requirements diagram, like you see in DMN. We can then drill down into each of the decisions and each of the business knowledge models to define the detailed decision logic. So it's a very straightforward, easy to understand, top-down process of elaboration. Now, this process isn't simply a sequence of steps. What we're doing is gradually building a structure which gradually increases in complexity. And each new feature we add to the model builds on the existing scaffolding. This becomes particularly clear if you're involved in DRAW, when you come into a workshop on the second or third day and people rub their eyes and take the paracetamol and try to get back into where they were the day before. And what they do is they look at the incomplete DRD from the previous day, and this gives them a frame of reference for this day's work. The incomplete model provides a context for defining the new areas of decision model they're going to work on. It provides a framework for thought. But of course, methodology is an old hobby horse of mine, so I'm going to move on and look at another use of incomplete models as templates. Templates are a form of incomplete model which is not just an intermediate step to producing a complete model, but which is an end in itself. Imagine that a fully specified model defines a single decision-making solution, and it defines it completely and exactly. An underspecified model defines a class of solutions. There could be a number of different decision-making solutions which fit a model which doesn't have everything defined. So you can use an underspecified model to create reusable or configurable systems. And you can implement those as multiple instances of more generic services and use DMN to specify the template for that generic service. So a good example for this is in the provision of marketplaces. Explain the background to why marketplaces are a good idea. Individual companies can face substantial barriers in providing automated decision-making services. We mustn't underestimate the cost and risks involved in producing a useful decision-making service. You have to provide a platform. You have to develop your decision-making solution and deploy it. You have to collect all the data you require in order to make your decision, which can sometimes be considerable. And you have to market the service that you're providing. And this could be especially problematic in the developing world, where there are lower margins to be had, higher risks. You're working in a less mature market where the data may be hard to acquire, and investment is generally hard to justify. So marketplaces provide a solution to these problems. They allow companies to share the costs and risks of putting up a useful service. So here we have a typical example of how such a marketplace works. The host provides a platform. It provides a broker service with which the customers will interact, and it might provide score models which are used by all of the tenants. It collects data both from the customers and from all the tenants on the platform, and it uses it to update the score models. And it promotes the marketplace. Each of the tenants, in other words, each of the possibly small companies who want to be involved in this marketplace, has a decision service on this platform. These decision services are specific configurations of a generic decision service. I've been involved in a number of marketplace projects over the last few years, and I've used the same approach every time. the generic decision service is defined using an incomplete decision model. Now, from the point of view of the host, the solution provider, using a DRD to define the template has quite a lot of advantages. Firstly, it allows you to define a fixed structure for the overall decision making. There'll be a fixed set of decisions. Use the same decision logic, same input data with the same object models and invocation and so on, are all fully specified in the model and are not available for configuration. You have specific areas which are configurable by the tenants, and these are provided as empty business knowledge models. So for example, here we have a risk category table, which is used for determining a risk category. We have a segmentation table, allowing the customer to be placed into a segment. And we have a set of eligibility rules, which are used to determine the eligibility of the customer. And all of those rule sets are either empty or have a sort of a standard starter pack of rules which the tenant can either remove or change or add to. This, you'll be used to the idea of making things generic by parameterizing them. What we're really doing here is providing parameters which have the full richness of DMN expressions. So it's a very powerful way of allowing configuration while constraining it to particular areas of your solution. And my final little point on this side, this may seem trivial. You can color code the DRDs. That seems a bit unimportant, but actually if you're talking to these tenant companies and you need to explain to them what they are allowed to configure and what they're not, it's a very, very easy way to do it. And it makes very clear exactly what is configurable and what is fixed. Another example here, we have a product offers decision. The logic of making product offers is fixed, but the tenants can define all the products they're prepared to offer in a product table. And it can configure, the rules by which we offer products are also fixed, but they can be configured using these offer parameters. The parameters are effectively a set of constants which are provided as a zero input decision table. They can be used as switches for offer rules, or they can be used as constants in the product offers logic. This allows a very convenient business-friendly configuration. So for example, the tenant organization can decide, do they want to allow upsell or not, or downsell or not? What particular type of affordability calculations do they want to be applied in certain cases? What tolerances they want to apply, and so on. These are simply parameters which can be set in designated business knowledge models, which allow them to define how their solution will work. But the solution itself works in exactly the same way, with the same decision logic, using the same structures of data and the same structures of offers which are made to the customer. Which means the broker has an easy job of managing the various offers which are made from the various tenants, because they're all the same in structure, they all work the same way, and they all follow the same basic principles. Another useful feature here is that you can use the decision model to form the basis for a configuration guide which you provide to your tenants. So you can use DRDs you can actually put the DRDs in the document and show them what parts are configurable and how they work, how the decisioning works. You can show them how the decision tables can be configured, what form they express their rules in, and so on. And all made much simpler by virtue of the fact that DMN is a very easy notation to read. So just to reinforce this point, what we're doing is separating configurable from non-configurable elements. This protects the broker service, allows a consistent set of products across the marketplace, and it allows reuse of data and scores across tenants and across the market. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out a bit and look more generally at the use of incomplete models as blueprints. A marketplace imposes a very strict regularity across a very well-defined class of solutions. It's a complete decision model, and you've got very restricted places which can be configured. But often you want to refer to much broader areas of decisioning and say something generally about how they work. And it is possible to identify broader, less well-defined classes of solution. So, for example, we might define a number of market segments. So I've chosen here retail finance, healthcare, and telecoms, for example. Those market segments tend to produce certain data entities that need to be talked about. There are certain objects which are commonly decided upon in different market segments. So the object model tends to be, and the input data required for decisioning tend to reflect those market segments. And then we can look at, I've called them life cycle phases, but areas in which you'd want to do decisioning. So here I've called out origination, customer management, and claims handling, but you could think of many others. These tend to define the top level decisions that need to be made in a domain. So with origination, for example, you want to know, are we going to offer this customer anything? And if so, what products are we going to offer them? In claim handling, we want to know, are we going to pay this person's claim? And if so, what are we going to pay? And how are we going to explain that to them? Then within each of those intersections, we can call out particular opportunities for decisioning solutions. So for example, for origination in retail finance, we might say, well, there's an opportunity for secured loans origination. That is a class of decisioning solutions across which you ought to be able to say something about the sorts of decisioning which we involved and the sorts of things we need to have in our decision model. So blueprints, just to be clear about what I'm going to propose, we're not going to be able to construct clear, definitive decision models, complete solutions. Blueprints are for components or typical elements of solutions, and they tend to be archetypes rather than templates. So they are things which can be tweaked for the job or provide a fast track way of producing a solution rather than a rigid template. But let's focus on one of these just for example. Let's take our secured loans origination opportunity. If you're doing origination on secured loans, there are certain things that you always have to address. A decision model for mortgages or auto finance or whatever always involves decisions on product eligibility, what products are available and which of these is the customer eligible for. Risk, the risk presented by the customer, which is usually determined from a number of scores and some way of combining them. You're always making decisions about affordability based on the customer's income and expenses. And you're always making decisions about the security provided by the asset which you're providing the finance for. Some sort of property valuation is involved. So, although I'm drawing a decision model here, what I'm really doing is finding commonalities. And in fact, it isn't just to the decision model you can, it isn't just in the decision model you can find these, you can find them in the process and case models too. And the benefit of using DMN here is that you can reuse solutions by recognizing and modeling these commonalities. You can then use the resulting blueprints to fast-track projects without imposing a rigid template, with patterns of requirements, design patterns, and implementation patterns. And finally, I'd just like to say a few words on the future of the use of incomplete decision models as a shared resource. So standards allow the sharing of incomplete models as templates and as blueprints, and we can do that in BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. I've focused here on DMN because of the decision modeling conference. We are already seeing this becoming more and more prevalent. You see it within organizations, organizations I think of as customer organizations. So you see different departments within a bank, for example, wanting to use a common approach to deciding on the affordability of a customer for different products, even though they don't reuse the actual logic. And I think it's an interesting matter because in the early days of decision modeling, we often justified the use of business knowledge models or boxed logic of any sort as a way of allowing reuse between different parts of an organization. But increasingly I've seen that organizations don't necessarily want to use exactly the same logic, but they do want to use the same structure. They want to make sure that wherever they carry out a certain type of decision making, they're considering the same sorts of sub-decisions and making sure that they address all the necessary features of a problem. We see it growing in, being used by consortia. So for example, we have MISMO for the mortgage industry. We have BPM plus health. Maybe Denis will fill us in later on the astounding progress they've been making. I was attending some of their presentations this week. Very interesting stuff going on in the development of common models of collaborative decision making throughout the healthcare process. And by vendors. So take FICO, for example. We are shortly to introduce the DRD as a new metaphor within our flagship product, Place Advisor or Decision Modeler, which will allow us to interpret DRDs directly in the tool. And this will then allow us to introduce layered products as solution accelerators, so we can have standard blueprints or templates for particular areas of decision making, which are then effectively layered products in their own right. So I think this is going to be a very common way of thinking about decisioning in the future. I'm starting to think of decision models almost like pieces of lace, you know, the value is in the holes. And so I encourage you to think of it in that way. And that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Alan. We have just a reminder to people, you can ask a question by raising your hand on the participants panel in Zoom, or by going over to the Slack channel for today's sessions and typing your question in there. So we have a first question is, sorry, lost it there. There we go. First question is from Jan, and he wants to ask why you would only specify top down. He said you could start at the bottom and then be incomplete towards the top decision.
That's an interesting idea, and it's very true. There is the top-down idea in decision modeling is really comes about because there are normally clear goals for your modeling. You're trying to achieve something. Often you want to achieve a particular decision being made in a particular process. So you know what you're trying to achieve, and those are the top-level decisions. But often when you go into a workshop, the participants understand parts of the model and don't understand the other parts so much. And yes, you can work in all sorts of directions with islands. I'm not sure how useful a decision model would be without, if you're saying it's incomplete in the sense that you don't know what you're going to do with these decisions, well, maybe. Oh, that's an interesting idea, Jan. We'd have to talk that through. Any more questions?
I don't see any other questions right now, but Jacob, I know that you often have comments on the presentations. Do you have any discussion or comments that you'd like to make?
Not this time. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, well, we're done a little bit early, but Alan, if you could definitely check the Slack channel afterwards and see.
Will do.
Oh, we do. Wait, we have a last minute question here about how far down in the details can you go? This is from Bob Moore.
Okay. What I like to do is to define configurability at the level of a BKM. You could take it lower, I suppose, but then you've got the trouble of defining and explaining what parts of a set of decision-making logic can be configured. I find it's much easier to break those out as separate BKMs. That's one of the nice things about DMN is you can have BKMs calling other BKMs, so you can express the configurability as parameters in one level, which are set in another level. That's in terms of templates, but the rest of the decision model, which is not configurable, is indeed defined right down to the last dot, jot and tittle. It is a full decision model, complete with all the logic.
Okay, good. Bob, was there anything else you wanted? You had said in the Slack channel that if you wanted to provide more context, you can definitely unmute yourself and just ask the question directly as well.
Yeah, I mean, the context of the question, Alan, was that, I mean, you and I have built lots and lots of credit approval applications, and every customer we go to goes off on different sort of flights of fancy in terms of how they want to do that. So you can draw, I mean, the sort of high level kind of picture you drew for things like eligibility fits very well because everybody does that. But once you start going down a level down from that, you start finding that, one bank wants to do a different thing to another bank, one furniture company wants to do a different thing to another furniture company, and so on.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I don't think you could impose a template on anybody. But I think people basically have the option. Do they want a bespoke product or do they want a cheap product? And they may find that they are perfectly happy to accept a configured template which meets 95% of what they want, if it avoids them having to design a bespoke system from scratch. And I think that's where templates and blueprints will find their role as ways to avoid bespoke engineering.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in the context of if you're talking to someone like HSBC, they have a different perspective from sort of 50 people who are selling want a marketplace where they can sell clothes.
Indeed. Yes, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Bob. And I don't think we will ever be in a world where the big players don't want bespoke solutions to exactly model exactly how they like to do things. No, so I'm still expecting to carry on producing bespoke solutions for large organizations.
They pay more money.
They do, yeah.
There is a comment from Jan Purchase in the Slack channel that he sees this as being an excellent way to support compliance in decision making. And we also have a question from Denis Gagné. So Denis, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. Hi, Alan. Thank you again for
Hi.
a very interesting presentation, as always. So it's not necessarily a question or more an observation. As you know, I'm a big fan of these frameworks and templating in different industries, which, if you want, provides an industry standardization approach. But then building out on Jan's comment, what you have is really top-down standardization, and then you have bottom-up differentiation. And I think that's where the power of combining those notions gives you a very complete market solution. So I like the ideas very much.
That's nicely put, Dennis. Yes, I like that. Yes, agreed. And I like Jan's comment as well about this being a way to support compliance.
Yeah, and I think the advantage of having our persistent Slack channel is that if we can kind of continue the discussions along here too over on Slack. We've reached the end of the time for this presentation, so we're going to have about 5 minutes while we do the switch over to our next presentation. And